Hello. So today I'm going to talk about brand slogans as poetry. So first I'll introduce the thesis, and then I'll talk a little bit about advertising as art or literature, and then kind of some of the economic motivations and why people don't see advertising as art. And then I'm going to move into brand slogans as poetry. I'll offer some examples of brand slogans, and then I'll talk about some authors who have been copywriters before going into the poetic elements of brand slogans, and then offering a case study through Apple slogans, and then I will offer a conclusion. So this presentation aims to explore how we may interpret brand slogans as poetry. I aim to argue that brand or product slogans can and should be considered poetry. Indeed, there is much debate around whether advertising can and should be considered art. The prominent media theorist Marshall McLuhan once said that advertising is the greatest art form of the 20th century. Even some authors have iterated similar things, like Aldous Huxley, who said that advertisement is one of the most interesting and difficult of modern literary forms. However, not everyone agrees, and it is true that when considering types of literature, one does not often make the connection with advertisements. Richard Simon notes that one of the core reasons advertisements have often been overlooked as literature is because of the surface triviality and the economic motivations of advertisements. Certainly, the surface triviality may be inferred by the perception of an obvious meaning, i.e., solely to sell a product, and also many critics are quick to dismiss advertisements as commercial and thus not true art. However, perhaps to reject advertisements on a commercial basis is a little harsh, as of course there are many authors who write texts in the interest of financial gain. So, how is an advertisement any different? As Richard Simon notes, the study of the formal characteristics of advertising as literature does not have to deny the economic system it serves, nor the culture it helps to create. Indeed, William O'Barr argues that many of the questions about the interpretation of art can be asked of advertising, such as authorial intention, critical reception, and audience interpretation. He says that analysis of commercials proceeds along similar lines as the interpretation of art. Many of the same questions and issues are relevant. In other words, there is more to advertising than just the image or text persuading the audience to buy a product. To use cultural theorist Stuart Hall's encoding and decoding, we understand that audiences bring their own experiences and as such create meaning that may or may not be as the advertiser intended. Similarly with poetry, the audience brings their own meaning to a poem regardless of whether the author intended it. Furthermore, the historian Roland Marchand proposes that advertisements are a sort of social tableau. Similar to 19th century living tableaus, advertisements depict and describe the material artifacts available for a purchase at a given time. They reveal the state of technology, the current styles in clothing, furniture, and other products. Therefore, when we look at advertisements in these terms, i.e. O'Barr's interpreting adverts as art, the audience's ability to create individual meaning, art and advertisements as intended to create an effect, and as social tableau, it's hard not to see them as art. Well, how about if we take this further and look at brand slogans as poetry? Now, I'm going to show you a few examples of some of my favourite poems. Forgive these words, they are not birds, by Cora Brooks. Night gathers across the river, by Ian McBride. The pause that refreshes, Coca-cola. Coward, bravery runs in my family, A.R. Ammons. Sometimes you feel like a nut, sometimes you don't, Hershey's. Found, these sleeping tablets may cause drowsiness, Peter Reading. The original, if your grandfather hadn't worn it, you wouldn't exist, Old Spice. Now, by placing the published poems alongside adverts, I've tried to demonstrate how similar some of these words are, or the way the meaning is created within these words. They kind of are like haikus or monostitch poems, and I think it's very important to see them side by side. So Salman Rushdie, an author who won the Booker Prize and the Booker of Booker Prizes for his novel Midnight's Children, actually began his career by writing advertising slogans. A notable example is for the Daily Mirror, which he wrote, Look into the mirror tomorrow. You'll like what you see. In fact, Rushdie is not the only published author who began by writing advertising slogans. Others include Fay Weldon, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Joseph Heller, and Don DeLillo, to name a few. Evidently, there is a connection between literature and advertising, as already discussed, but what in particular makes brand slogans poetry? Poetry, as well as brand slogans, relies heavily and is all about using the right word in the right place. The wording and structure is carefully thought out by the author with the intention of creating a mood and meaning, especially given word limit constraints, like a haiku or mono-stitch poem. In addition, the meter is very much an integral part of a brand slogan. Brand slogans are also constructed to have a certain flow and rhythm, in order that perhaps for the reader it would be enjoyable, gripping, and leave a lasting impression, like a poet might try to do. Perhaps even to be emotive, the brand slogan might want to connect with the reader, offer a shared experience. Certainly, Tolstoy believed that. He says art is for the artist to express and share a feeling or experience with the audience. Now, I've already introduced some brand slogans alongside poems, but I want to take a closer look at a few slogans from Apple. Hell froze over. Expand at will. A little mini, a lot of leopard. Hello, tomorrow. These are all very short, the shortest being only 2 words. But to a reader, they all feel quite emotive, perhaps especially the one with the 2 words, hello, tomorrow. There is a certain abruptness to it that plants itself in the reader's mind. What does it mean? There is a suggestion of modernity, hopefulness, new beginnings, but it doesn't actually say that much about the product or the brand. None of these slogans really do. It's kind of up to the reader to interpret the meaning and connect with the product. Take expand at will. Now, if we make a direct connection to the product, we might assume it means that this product offers more space or storage than a previous product, but a reader may not necessarily interpret it that way. Indeed, as with a poem, different readers may extract different meanings. As Stuart Hall suggested, the audience brings their own meaning and experience to the message, and as such, the way they decode the message. So, with reference to poetry, Monroe C Beardsley offers a similar suggestion. He says texts acquire determinate meaning through the interactions of their words without the intervention of an authorial will. Thus, perhaps in these brand slogans, the advertiser's intention is somewhat irrelevant. As Marshall McLuhan articulates, the medium is the message. So, in other words, the poetry of the advertisement, i.e. the use of words, the meter, the rhythm, creates a meaning and constructs a mood, as poetry would. Indeed, these slogans create an effect which sort of fulfills what McLuhan says. He says, the concern of the advertiser is to make an effect. Any painter or any artist, any musician sets out to create an effect. He sets a trap to catch somebody's attention. Any painter, any poet, any musician sets a trap for your attention. That is the nature of art. So, with the Apple brand slogans, while they may not say that much about the product itself, the fact of the medium being a poem is enough to construct a mood and kind of lure the attention of the audience. So, in conclusion, in spite of what Richard Simon notes as economic motivations, advertisements such as brand slogans may still be read through poetic characteristics. As we have seen through a side-by-side comparison with brand slogans and published poetry, the slogans are not dissimilar from the mono-stitch or haiku poetic genre. Indeed, many authors like Rushdie and Fitzgerald had started their careers in advertising. Through a close reading of the Apple slogans, we can see that, as with poetry, meter, rhythm, flow, use of words, and creation of meaning are all integral elements of brand slogans that are also found in poetry. So, through an exploration of brand slogans as poetry, this presentation has aimed to prove that brand slogans can and should be considered poetry. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this presentation.